I lived in the second oldest house in my area near Waco, Texas, from when I was about 11 till about 18. I didn't know the significance of this really, but I feel it's the only possible explanation for any supernatural presence. I'm not sure when the house was originally built, but the rest of the houses in the area were built between the 40s and the 50s, so I suppose it's older than that. The house seemed normal when we first moved in. Only 2 families lived there over the years, so it wasn't like there was a huge turnover rate. In fact, no one really noticed or mentioned anything supernatural with the house. However, there was a secret room. This room was actually a selling point for my parents to help us deal with the moving. Even though my dad was in the military, we lived at our past house for quite a while and didn't really want to move. So, of course, when my parents said there was a secret passageway connecting one of the possible bedrooms with the secret room, we became pretty excited about the new house. My sister and I fought for it, but I won because the other bedroom already had flower wallpaper up. When I first saw my room, I went straight to the closet to see the secret door. The secret door wasn't really secret. It was right in the back of my closet and plain to see. However, it was a lot smaller than any normal door. Even when I was only 11 or 12, I had to squat down to get in. It looked like it was made for a child to use. Another interesting thing was that the door handle was not really built into the door. It was just kind of a handle added as an afterthought. This made me think that it was originally some sort of attic or crawl space, not meant for a room. The door was lockable by key from my side of the door. The other side had no handle or keyhole. When you open the door, there's a very small hallway which was about the same height as the door and not really fit for an adult, but it was just a few feet long. Then you got into the room. The room was just an empty added room above the garage. There's no way out except for the secret passageway to my closet. There were no windows and one light with a string that was used to turn it on hanging from the ceiling. The room was completely white with seemingly new wallpaper. There was no furniture or anything left in the room from the previous owners. In fact, I don't think the previous owners used it at all. I believe it was sealed up before or soon after they moved in, and it wasn't touched since then. Since it was pretty dusty, but I don't know, who knows. The lock did seem pretty old and I had a hard time moving it, as if it was rusted or the wood was warped or something. Now, my parents thought the room could be me and my sister's own little toy room or whatever when they first saw it. But when they moved in, they had second thoughts. I'm not sure what it was, but they said it was because they couldn't hear or see us if we got hurt in that room, since it was so detached from the rest of the house. Of course, since we wanted our own secret room so badly, they eventually gave in, but said that we had to tell them when we were playing in there, and had to keep the door to my room, my closet, and the secret door open at all times when we were in there. So we just went on. Like I said earlier, nothing much really supernatural happened in the rest of the house, and not even too much in the secret room. At least, not to me. My sister began having an imaginary friend. Whenever I wasn't in there, I could hear her whispering and talking to somebody. I noticed that although at first she used to have fun in there, as time went on she kind of seemed sadder even when she was in there. However, up until now, this could have all just been a coincidence, so I didn't give it much thought. The only weird things that happened to me was, at night, I thought I could hear some kind of scratching on the wall behind my room. Except it wasn't, like, with fingernails. It was softer sounding. It wasn't the door either, but coming from inside the room. Now, I believe that I only heard this at night because, well, it's quiet at night. And scratching is like a rubbing sound so soft that you normally couldn't hear it. I really had no idea what it was. I told my dad about it once and he looked around for some animal but couldn't find any. So we just forgot about it and lived on. Like I said, it was so soft it never really bothered me. It could have been some far off tree rubbing against the house for all I knew. The rubbing happened constantly, but like I said, I never paid it much mind. At least until my sister went in the room one night. She knew about the rubbing too and never really said anything about it. One night though, probably about a year or so after moving into the house, the rubbing was going on as usual. I was in limbo before falling asleep when I thought that somebody was in my room and unlocking the closet door. I thought it might have been a dream, but I looked around and saw my door was unlocked and open, so I got up to check it out. I was a little scared, but I realized it was probably Mom or Dad checking out the rubbing sound, since I told them it still happens sometimes. I turned on the light in my closet and looked in. I saw a figure sitting in the room facing the wall. Now, even when I was a kid, I had been pretty brave. I was still scared since I was pretty young, but I knew that you can't just turn and run away. You'll never know. I said hello, and I heard, "She wanted to see me," in what sounded like my sister's voice. The light in there was in the middle of the room, and it was tough taking those first few steps to the middle of the dark room, but like I said, I couldn't just leave, so I went in there and turned it on. When I looked at the figure, it was indeed my sister, sitting and just scratching at the wallpaper. I touched her and she was crying, so I pulled her up and out of the room. I'm pretty glad that I didn't just lock the door and run, or else she'd be stuck in there all night. This is one reason why I never run away from anything abnormal. I locked the door and took her to her room, and watched as she went to sleep. I really thought she could have been sleepwalking or something, although she never had before. And since it was over, I didn't want to wake up my parents. I just went back to sleep. The next day, I asked my sister in the morning if she remembered going into the room. She looked freaked out. I told her she probably was just sleepwalking, but she said that girl asked her to come look at her pictures. She didn't start crying, but she was about to because she was scared. I didn't ask who the girl was. I told her it was just a dream and went to prove it. She didn't want to go in the room again, so I went in and saw what she was scratching at the wall. Only a little bit was scratched away, so I started peeling some more wallpaper off. Under the paper, there was different pictures drawn in what looked like crayon. They were typical kid pictures of mainly cats and houses. However, there was one picture that I thought was kind of weird. It was a little girl, a cat, a mom, and a dad. Now, everything looked like a normal kid family portrait, except the dad had no face. It was just a circle. Of course, my rational side said she just never finished it. But the dad in the picture looked strangely out of place. Like the lines were distorted or she had a hard time drawing it. Anyway, I told my parents and they yelled at me for pulling back the wallpaper. I didn't want my sister to get in trouble, so I didn't say anything about her or what happened last night. My parents said we had to get it fixed now, and they were pretty mad. They didn't let me play in there again as a punishment. The whole thing still seemed pretty normal to me. You know, kids just draw on walls. Parents put up wallpaper to cover it. I didn't realize it until later that night when the scratching sound started up, that it sounded like a crayon. I really started thinking that it was the girl my sister was talking about drawing on the wall. Now, after this happened, I started to believe that the girl was actually in there. Once I started acknowledging her presence, weirder things began to happen. It happened pretty slowly. I was about 14 or 15 after this episode with my sister, and the weird things were happening over the course of the next few years. I lived in the house until I was about 18. The changes were so subtle that I didn't really notice they were happening until much, much later. The drawing sounds increased a little bit, and soon they were even audible during the day. I started hearing the pattering of little feet. The more I noticed these things, the more emotional I felt about them. I started feeling angry the more I heard the sounds, especially when I was trying to sleep. However, I always managed to control myself, and to try to think that the little girl was obviously just trying to have fun, and I would calm myself down. However, this was going on so long that I finally asked my sister about it when I was about 16. I asked her if she heard the sounds. She said she did, although they were pretty quiet. Now, I don't think that it was so weird since obviously I could hear them too, and I told her how annoying it was. She kind of looked at me like she was hurt, and she said every time she heard it she felt really sad. She had trouble talking about it, but I told her this was pretty important since it was going to affect the rest of my years living in the house. She told me that the girl was the girl that she used to play with in the room. She didn't know her name, but they used to just play together. She said she looked like a little girl about her age and they had fun together. However, as my sister got older, the little girl seemed to get older too, except very unnaturally. It was subtle at first, but she soon began to hate seeing her. She said she looked like she shouldn't be alive anymore. I didn't really know what this meant. My sister said she wore the same dress the whole time, even when the girl grew out of it. I asked her why she went in the room that one night to find the pictures. She said she didn't want to, but the girl made her feel so sad she would do anything to help her out. However, this still freaked her out, so I didn't ask any more questions. Things just got worse every night, and I hated hearing that sound. I was so mad that she wouldn't just shut up so I could go to sleep. The weird thing was, I was scared at the exact same time, since I knew that whatever it was wasn't actually alive anymore. What also freaked me out was that the sound didn't annoy my sister, but I guess she just had more of a tolerance than I did. I asked my parents who used to live there. They said a family with 2 sons. Of course, that didn't have anything to do with the room since they locked it off the entire time they were there. So I asked if they knew anything about the family before them. They said the original owners were the one who built the house, and that they didn't know much about them, except they had a daughter who died when she was about 11. I asked if they knew how she died. They said it was some kind of accident, so it wasn't murder or child abuse or anything. I also asked if she died in the room, but they said they didn't think so. I really think that that was the girl in the room, although I have no idea why she inhabited it still. Once I knew this, I sorta had an idea of what I was dealing with. Last year was when things got the worst. I almost heard the constant drawing and her jumping around inside the room. The footsteps sounded heavier and were much louder. If I ever heard it, I'd pound on the door to the room so she would stop immediately. But I'd hear soft whimpering or crying. She'd also start drawing again later on. Sometimes I'd scream at her to shut up. I got really mad every time it happened, since it had been going on for 6 years. However, I knew that I had to do something about this. I was a lurker by this time, so I've read a lot of ghost threads, and I remembered how pussy most of the goons were regarding dealing with anything and never checked anything out. So I knew that I had to at least understand what was going on, and if possible, try to end it. I didn't really have a plan, but I knew I had to see the girl or talk to her something. Last year, shortly before I turned 18, my parents went away for the weekend, so I took the key to the secret room from their room. They kept it and locked it away ever since they found me taking off the wallpaper. I was determined to see her, so I stayed up expecting to hear sounds. I couldn't hear anything so soon, I just fell asleep. It was about 1 a.m. when I woke up to a loud bang, like someone jumped or fell. I heard footsteps afterwards, and of course, the drawing. The first thing I felt before fear was pure anger. I hated that she woke me up, even though this was what I wanted. I immediately grabbed the key and went to the door. I was pounding, and I said, "That's it," and I unlocked the door. The sound stopped and I heard a whimpering. I threw the door open. This was the first time I had seen the room in years. The light coming from my room illuminated the figure, pretty similar to when I saw my sister a few years earlier. This is when I began to feel a wave of different emotions. I was really angry, really scared. Yet, I also knew that I had to do this and remain calm. I went into the room and I stood a few feet away from the figure, which was standing in the corner. I turned on the lights. What I saw was probably the most horrific sight I could probably ever have even thought of in my entire life. Any horror movie monster had nothing on how unnatural this girl looked. I finally realized why my sister had described her in such a weird way. Her body was taller than she should have been. Her limbs were lanky and bony and stretched out like they kept growing past how tall she was. She was also wearing a really small dress and was really, really tight on her body. Her face looked like her head had continued to grow, but her face didn't. Her skin was stretched and her eyes were sunken back into her head, yet wide open, and her small childlike teeth were exposed, since her lips were stretched back with the rest of her face. Her hair was down past her waist, and her face had tears streaming down it. I took all of this in just a moment, and as soon as our eyes met, she let out a wail as if she was crying and moaning at the same time. But it wasn't a loud wail like most people describe with ghosts. It was pretty soft, and it was as if she was in terrible, terrible pain. But I really couldn't tell the expression on her face since it was so unnatural and stretched out. As soon as I heard the wail, all the anger in my body was overcome by fear, and I just fucking ran. I wish I could have stayed. I wish I would have ran for a video camera, but I just ran. I know I'd been talking about how much I hate when people don't investigate things, but I was so terrified I just ran. Once I got out of the room, I got in my car and I drove to my friend's house for the night. Once I really realized what had happened, I was in a cold shiver and scared out of my mind the entire night. I was too scared to go back until my parents got home. I waited till they got back on Sunday, then I went back to the house. They asked me why I took the key and left the closet door open. I told them it was because I wanted to see if I could sell any of my old toys on eBay. I took one last look in the room and locked the door. Ever since then, nothing happened, and I don't really know why things stopped. But I'm hoping it's not because I let her out, like the ring or something, that she's really evil. Nothing since has ever happened, and I really hope that I helped her out in some way. But in all honesty, I don't really care. My parents moved after I went to college, and I have no intention of ever going back there. I did come up with a theory, though. The theory was that a male member of her family was really mean to her and hated her playing in there. Maybe beat her? And while the female members always felt sad, hence my sister and the girl's willingness to open up to her at first. Anyway, like I said, it's all just a theory, but it does kind of make sense. After all this happened last year, and the more I think about it, the harder it is to remember. Anyway, I'm sorry for putting up such a long post. I didn't realize that I had this much to tell. I would like to thank all of the lovely and amazing patrons currently listed on screen right now. And again, I do this every video, so if you want to become a patron and get on the video, you have to go to Patreon down below. Dan R. Neophyte Games, Chaos X JY Pyromancer, Hayden MH Ethan A, Daniel H, Maximilian Charles P, Go Cute Puppy, LLC, Young Sykes Dark Side of the Bear, and welcome new patrons, Ravnik? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Please correct me, Ravnik. And Paul T. Guys, thank you all so much.